Chapter 7. Summoning the Allfather. While perhaps not as iconic in modern popular culture as the hammer-wielding storm god Thor or the devious trickster Loki, Odin is a prominent character in Norse mythology. To the Vikings, he was the chief deity, a name to be revered and feared in equal measure. It was the Allfather who demanded bravery, strength, and battle lust in a society where warriors were regarded above all others. To earn his respect meant feasting with him in Valhalla until Ragnarok. To disappoint him was to be damned to the murky halls of the underworld. Odin is the supreme god of the Norse pantheon, heavily associated with death, war, magic, healing, wisdom, and poetry, and is the figure most attested in the poetic and prose Eddas. According to the creation myth in Völuspá, he and his brothers Vili and Ve were among the earliest beings, descended from the primordial rime ogres on one side and the first divinities on the other. After massacring the ogres, the trio sculpted the known universe from the corpse of their leader, Ymir, establishing the heavenly domain of Asgard at the summit of Yggdrasil. Asgard includes Odin's personal abode, Valaskjalf, as well as the palace of Valhalla, his great hall, where most of his business is conducted. In Viking culture, the highest honour was reserved for warriors slain in glorious combat. But Odin is apathetic when it comes to the wars of men. He cares little for law or justice. He does not choose sides. It was believed that the spirits of half of all worthy fighters join the Allfather's army in the afterlife, the Einherjar, to train and feast with him every day, and that the other half are taken to the goddess Freyja at Folkvang. Valhalla itself boasts a splendid roof, made of the Einherjar's gold shields, upon which the goat Heidrun and stag Eikthirnir stand to eat the foliage of the sacred tree Lerad. Heidrun produces mead in her udders, perpetually filling a cauldron with alcohol. This mead, in turn, is served to Odin and his guests each night by the Valkyries, the same divine maidens who collect the warriors' spirits from the battlefield. Odin's physical strength and skill are undeniable in Norse lore, yet he does not spend much of his time engaged in conflict. Instead, the Allfather is a practiced sorcerer and master of rune magic. He has an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, and wanders the 9 worlds seeking it. So obsessed is Odin that he once hung himself on Yggdrasil and sacrificed one of his eyes at Mimisbrunn, Mimir's well, to gain secret wisdoms. He is often described as an old, bearded man, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a traveller's cloak. A far cry from the medieval knight shown in the Final Fantasy games. But he regularly assumes disguises when interacting with unsuspecting nobles and heroes. There are, however, a few specific instances to the contrary. For example, when preparing for Ragnarok, it is said that Odin will don a golden helmet, clothe himself in an intricate coat of mail, and wield Gungnir, his dwarf-made spear. Gungnir has appeared on many historical artifacts, and successfully launching a wooden lance over an enemy host was considered a favourable omen by the Vikings. It replicated the Allfather's act of initiating war between the Aesir and Vanir tribes of gods early in the Norse myth cycle. Perhaps more famed than his weapon, though, is Odin's 8-legged stallion. Sleipnir is considered the best of all horses, conceived and birthed by Loki, while in the form of a mare. Capable of travelling great distances in a single bound, or galloping faster than even the most impressive of the giant steeds, Sleipnir is also occasionally loaned to other deities when completing important tasks. According to the Volva, whose knowledge and prophecies are the poetic narrative of Völuspá, Odin is destined to meet his doom at Ragnarök. It is foretold that, having consulted with the gods and wise Mimir at Mimisbrunn, he will lead the Einherjar from Valhalla to the final battlefield on the plain of Vigrid. Only then will the monstrous wolf Fenrir exact revenge on the Allfather for his lifetime of enchainment, swallowing him whole before the 9 worlds are set ablaze. In the Final Fantasy series, Odin is a recurring character, typically as a summoned being. He first appeared in Final Fantasy III as an optional boss, offering to lend his services to the player's party upon his defeat. His initial design was created by celebrated franchise artist Yoshitaka Amano, but it has seen many aesthetic evolutions over the past 30 years. With the exception of Final Fantasy X, 12, and 15, Odin has played a role in one form or another in every main series title. These incarnations have ranged from the historical commander of Final Fantasy VI and the celestial avatar of Final Fantasy XI to the shape-shifting automaton of Final Fantasy XIII. But all share the trait that the player may recruit Odin to assist them in combat. He made his 3D debut in Final Fantasy VII, featuring as a knight who can be called into battle using materia. Odin is one of only 2 such entities in the game that employ multiple attacks, the other being Choco Mog, and both of his summoning animations reference Norse lore. Compared to previous entries in the franchise, however, his role in the compilation of Final Fantasy VII is relatively minor. In Final Fantasy VII, the Odin materia can be obtained at Shinra Manor when Cloud and the others arrive at Nibelheim. During the side quest to have Vincent join the party, the player must unlock a safe on the mansion's 2nd floor and kill the Lost Number boss inside. Their success is rewarded with the materia, as well as the key to Vincent's basement chamber. Odin can thereafter be utilised, and, if summoned by a party member, he will briefly draw the battleground into a dark, mountainous terrain of his dimension. He appears in gilded plate armour, not chainmail, as in the Ragnarok foretelling presented in Snorri Sturluson's book Gylfaginning, and is generally brandishing an enormous glowing scimitar, although this switches to a pink lance when certain conditions are met. More iconic, perhaps, is his helm, a golden mask from which antler-like horns rise, seemingly an elaborate version of his Ragnarok headgear. Beyond the possible association with the heavenly stag Eikthenir, or the hearts that graze on the roots of Yggdrasil, there is no mythological explanation for the antlers on his helmet. In Crisis Core, however, Odin's garb undergoes a radical transformation into something more akin to Oyurai, armour historically worn by Japanese samurai on horseback. Exchanging his medieval European knight design for an ensemble more traditional to the feudal Far East suggests a reference to Final Fantasy VI, where Odin's Magicite evolves into the Raiden Magicite, an esper named after the Shinto god of storms. The reason for the Odin materia's placement at Shinra Manor may not be immediately obvious, but it is certainly not coincidental. First of all, The Allfather was a patron of the wealthiest and most powerful in Viking society, so having the location belong to Shinra Incorporated makes sense. Furthermore, since Final Fantasy IV, the Odin character has been affiliated with castles, Baron Castle, Baal Castle, and the Ancient Castle respectively, as a means of reflecting his role in Valhalla. Final Fantasy VII is set in a more contemporary, technologically advanced world than its predecessors, and there are no palaces to speak of. Shinra headquarters functions like a traditional castle from a political perspective. The fortified town of Kalm provides the closest aesthetic appearance to a castle, but the manor in Nibelheim arguably embodies the same historical importance as castles in previous games. Consequently, Odin's presence there continues the trend. As discussed in Chapter 4, many elements of the town of Nibelheim are derived from Niflheim, the realm of primordial mist in Norse cosmology. From the melting waters of this bleak wasteland sprang the first Rime ogres, the ancestors of Odin and his brothers. Eons later, the Allfather gave Hel stewardship of Niflheim as an underworld, repeatedly returning there over the course of the myth cycle to gather knowledge and truth. As such, his association with Nibelheim is apparent, lending additional rationale to why his materia can be found there. Moreover, Odin's summoning animations in both Final Fantasy VII and Crisis Core show him leaping from a mountain spur reminiscent of the jagged spires of Mount Nibel. Following on from this, in the game, Odin always emerges in battle on a six-legged steed. Like in the myths surrounding Sleipnir, the stallion is grey in colour, white in Before Crisis, albeit with gold stripes and a dark brown mane, fiery red in Crisis Core. Almost all of Sleipnir's attestations in the Eddas describe him with 8 limbs, which has been suggested by scholars to represent 4 mourners carrying a coffin or body, thus being another allusion to death. Depictions of the horse through the centuries have varied, with some showing him to have 6 forelegs and 2 hind legs, so the unusual variant in Final Fantasy VII is not without basis. What is interesting, however, is that Sleipnir's galloping leap during the summoning sequence is lifted from Norse lore, as it is said he can cover great distances in a single bound. As was referenced in the previous chapter, after the death of Balder, the messenger god Hermod, another of Odin's sons, volunteers to ride to Hel to bargain for his half-brother's release. The Allfather agrees and loans him Sleipnir. Upon reaching the towering gates of Aludnir, Hel's great hall, the stallion vaults them with ease. Curiously, Snorri's retelling of Hermod's journey into the dark, barren landscapes of Niflheim evokes the same images as Odin's summoning animations, particularly that of Crisis Core. As in earlier titles in the series, Odin's principal attack in Final Fantasy VII is Zantetsuken, which causes instant death to most enemies. Similarly, the materia system allows the player to imbue a party member's weapon, offensively, or armour, defensively, with the death status effect, by equipping and linking the Odin materia, temporarily granting them the Allfather's power. Just one of Final Fantasy VII's many notorious translation issues, however, Zantetsuken was changed to Steel-Bladed Sword in Western versions, rather than simply keeping its intended Japanese name. This was later amended in Crisis Core. Nevertheless, given that Odin was a patron of death for the Vikings, specifically death on the battlefield, the outcome of Zantetsuken is appropriate. According to the Eddas, though, Odin does not carry a sword, Instead, as previously mentioned, he wields Gungnir, a spear infused with rune magic so that it never misses its target. Gungnir actually appears in Final Fantasy VII as Odin's secondary attack, albeit mistranslated as Gunge Lance, which is unleashed during boss fights or when all of the enemies are immune to instant death. Lastly, there is an argument to be made that the All-Father's attributes have influenced minor plot points or character details in the compilation. One such example is that for the duration of Cloud and the group's pursuit of Sephiroth, between Midgar and Nibelheim, Final Fantasy VII's two major locations primarily inspired by Norse mythology, the antagonist is described as disguising himself in a black cape. This strongly reflects Odin's regular wanderings of Midgard, clad in a traveller's cloak, and using a variety of aliases to conceal his identity while interfering with the lives of men. On a more abstract level, Sephiroth himself is in disguise for much of the game, for he is manipulating the shape-shifting abilities of the Genova specimen to recreate his own appearance. Another parallel exists between Odin and Nanaki. The All-Father's recognition as a god of knowledge and wisdom derives from his sacrifice of an eye, so that he could take a single drink from the waters of Mimisbrunn. Similarly, the number 13 held a degree of importance in Viking lore. Two instances are the number of Valkyries in Odin's service, according to the poem Grimnismal, and the number of members in the Council of Gods, which comprises the 12 principal male deities and the All-Father himself as chief among them. In Final Fantasy VII, the character perceived to be the wisest of the player's party is Nanaki, despite being an adolescent by his racist standards. The beast, however, is initially known to the group as Red 13, a reference to the tattoo inscribed on him by Professor Hojo to mark Nanaki as a unique entity for experimentation. Between his capture from Cosmo Canyon and his escape from Shinra headquarters during the events of Final Fantasy VII, Red 13 loses his right eye. It is not clear in the original game exactly how this occurs, but the early material files section of the Ultimania Omega details an abandoned scenario whereby Nanaki had a bitter history with Hojo's other canine specimens. Furthermore, the 18th episode of Before Crisis later revealed that he sacrificed his freedom, and by extension his eye, in exchange for the safety of his companion, Dene. The tales and mysteries of Odin are near inseparable from the mythology of the Norsemen. It is therefore unsurprising that he is mentioned in almost every chapter of this book. The next entry will explore how the All-Father came to learn the secrets of runes, and how these, in turn, would eventually inspire the compilation of Final Fantasy VII.